The desperate battlefield. Emerges Empire. The battlefield stretched across the void, an endless sea of fire and destruction. The war had raged for months, but now it had reached its most critical moment. The Titrax Dominion, the most feared empire in the galaxy, had arrived in full force. Their fleet, made of massive black warships, covered the sky like an unstoppable storm. On the other side, the human fleet stood its ground, smaller in number but unwilling to surrender. Their ships, though battered and scarred from past battles, still held formation. They had no choice. Behind them was Nova Prime, the last stronghold of humanity. If they failed today, there would be nothing left. Admiral Elias Carter stood on the bridge of the HSS Indomitable, watching the battle unfold on the holographic display. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched behind his back. The situation was worse than expected. The Titrax had deployed their Doom Crushers, massive battleships designed to tear through entire fleets with ease. "Admiral, we have lost 2 destroyers already," a voice reported. It was Lieutenant Sarah Kova, his second in command. Her face was pale, but her voice remained steady. Carter took a deep breath. The battle had barely started, and they were already losing ground. The Titrax had superior weapons, faster ships, and more experience in war. But Carter knew one thing. They did not understand humans. "They expect us to break," he muttered. "They think we will run." The Titrax commander, High Lord Virex, appeared on the comm screen. His sharp, insect-like face twisted into what could only be described as amusement. His yellow eyes glowed as he spoke in a deep, mechanical voice. "Humans, you stand before the might of the Titrax Dominion. Surrender now, and I will grant you a quick death." Silence filled the bridge. The crew turned to Carter, waiting for his response. He stepped forward, his eyes locked onto Virex. "You don't know us very well, do you?" His voice was calm, but there was steel behind it. Virex tilted his head, a mocking gesture. "Bravery is useless against annihilation." Carter gave a small smile. "We'll see about that." Then, without another word, he cut the transmission. The moment the screen went dark, Carter turned to his officers. "Prepare all weapon systems. We hold the line." Outside, the battle intensified. The Titrax fleet moved forward, their laser cannons lighting up the void. Human ships dodged and weaved, firing back, but the Titrax defenses were too strong. A massive explosion shook the Indomitable. Red warning lights flashed. Direct hit on the lower hull. Someone shouted. Carter gritted his teeth. The Titrax Doom Crushers were pushing forward, breaking through the defensive line. The human fleet was being torn apart ship by ship. Then, something unexpected happened. The Indomitable's AI, Athena, spoke through the speakers. "Admiral Carter, analysis complete. Enemy fleet has an opening on the right flank. If we move now, we can strike." Carter's eyes narrowed. "How sure are you?" 87% probability of success. It wasn't perfect, but it was their only chance. Carter slammed his fist onto the console. "All ships, follow us. We're breaking through." The Indomitable surged forward, leading the charge. The other human ships followed, engines roaring as they pushed toward the weak spot in the Titrax formation. The enemy didn't expect it. The humans moved like lightning, dodging fire and returning shots with deadly accuracy. The Indomitable's main cannons glowed bright as they fired a massive energy blast straight into a Doom Crusher's hull. The Titrax warship exploded, sending debris flying in all directions. For the first time, the battlefield shifted. The humans were no longer just defending. They were fighting back. Carter watched as the Titrax fleet hesitated. "They weren't ready for this," he muttered. But the fight wasn't over yet. High Lord Virex was not a fool. He saw the change in the battle and prepared a counterattack. Suddenly, a new Titrax warship appeared on the sensors. It was 10 times bigger than any other ship on the battlefield, Its dark form cast a shadow over the entire human fleet. Lieutenant Kova's voice wavered. "Admiral, what is that?" Carter's face hardened. He already knew. The Tyrant's Wrath. The Titrax flagship. The battlefield fell silent for a moment, as if space itself held its breath. Then, in a deep, thunderous voice, High Lord Virex spoke once more. "Now, you will see true power." The battle was far from over. To be continued. The Indomitable awakens. The battlefield fell into a tense silence as the Tyrant's Wrath loomed over the war-torn space. The sheer size of the Titrax flagship made every other ship seem small. It was a fortress in space, armed with planet-destroying weapons, impenetrable shields, and enough firepower to obliterate an entire fleet. On the HSS Indomitable, Admiral Elias Carter stood firm, his eyes locked on the monstrous enemy vessel. His crew waited for his orders, their faces pale but determined. Retreat was not an option. Surrender was not in their nature. Lieutenant Sarah Kova spoke first, her voice uneasy. "Admiral, our weapons can't penetrate a ship of that size. Its shields are stronger than anything we faced." Carter clenched his jaw. He already knew this. The Tyrant's Wrath was more than just a warship. It was a symbol of Titrax dominance. Its presence alone meant one thing. The Titrax were ready to finish humanity once and for all. But Carter had a weapon of his own. "Athena," he said, addressing the ship's eye. "Can you analyze the weak points?" The calm, mechanical voice of Athena responded immediately. "Analyzing. Completed. The Tyrant's Wrath has near impenetrable frontal defenses, but its rear energy cores are more vulnerable. A direct hit could disable its primary shields. But, Carter prompted. The enemy knows this. The rear is heavily guarded. Any approach would be suicide." Carter exhaled. The logical move was to retreat, regroup, and find another strategy. But there was no time. If the Tyrant's Wrath reached Nova Prime, the war would be over. The Titrax wouldn't just conquer. They would exterminate every last human. He turned to his crew. "If we don't act now, we lose everything." Silence. Then, one by one, his officers nodded. Lieutenant Kova straightened her back. "What's the plan?" "Admiral." Carter's eyes burned with determination. "We take the fight to them. The charge begins." The Indomitable's engines roared to life, and the massive warship surged forward, pushing past the burning wreckage of destroyed vessels. The remaining human fleet followed, forming a tight formation behind it. The Titrax were caught off guard. They had expected the humans to flee, to scatter in fear. Instead, the Indomitable charged straight toward the enemy heart. From the Tyrant's Wrath, High Lord Virex watched with cold amusement. "Foolish," he hissed. "Fire at will." The Titrax fleet unleashed a storm of plasma cannons, ion blasts, and missile barrages. The space around the Indomitable turned into a death trap. Inside the ship, alarms blared as the shield struggled to absorb the relentless attacks. Sparks flew from overloaded systems. The crew gritted their teeth, holding their positions. "Athena, redirect power to forward shields." Carter commanded. Reallocating. 75% power diverted. Shields holding. Barely. Then, the Indomitable returned fire. Its Nova cannons, powerful weapons capable of melting through enemy armor, fired in rapid succession. Explosions ripped through the Titrax front lines, sending ships spiraling into the void. The Titrax reeled back. They had never seen human weapons this powerful. But the Tyrant's Wrath was still untouched. Carter narrowed his eyes. "We need to break through to the rear. That's our only chance." The final barrier. As the Indomitable pushed deeper into enemy territory, the Titrax elite warships moved into position, blocking the path. "These must be their strongest ships," Kova muttered. Carter didn't hesitate. "Then we hit them first." Firing main cannons. The Indomitable's weapons glowed bright as it fired a full-powered barrage. The enemy ships stood their ground, absorbing some of the hits but taking heavy damage. A desperate battle unfolded in the depths of space. The Indomitable and its allies fought with everything they had. The Titrax held nothing back. Ships exploded. Metal shattered. Bodies were lost to the void. But Carter never wavered. Finally, Athena spoke. "Admiral, we are within striking distance of the enemy's rear energy cores." Carter's heart pounded. This was their moment. He turned to his crew. "One last push. Fire everything we have." The Indomitable unleashed its most powerful attack yet, aiming directly at the Tyrant's Wrath's exposed weak point. The battlefield erupted in fire. To be continued. The Warship's Wrath. The Indomitable's final barrage tore through space, heading straight for the Tyrant's Wrath's exposed energy cores. The massive Xitrax flagship, once thought to be unstoppable, suddenly faced the full fury of humanity's most powerful warship. Then, impact. A blinding explosion erupted across the enemy's rear defenses. Shockwaves rippled through the void, debris scattered in all directions. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent. Had they done it? Had they actually crippled the Xitrax flagship? Admiral Elias Carter watched the holographic display, his heart pounding. The blast should have been enough to disable the Tyrant's Wrath, maybe even destroy it. But as the smoke cleared, his breath caught in his throat. The Xitrax warship was still there. Though damaged, it remained functional. Its shields flickered, its hull scorched, but it was still in the fight. "Admiral," Lieutenant Sarah Kova spoke, her voice tense. "That should have crippled them. Why are they still standing?" Before Carter could answer, a deep, menacing voice echoed through the comms. "Impressive," High Lord Virex said, "but not enough." Suddenly, the Tyrant's Wrath retaliated. A monstrous plasma cannon emerged from its lower hull, glowing with an eerie blue light. The weapon charged, energy crackling across its surface. Carter's eyes widened. Brace for impact. The plasma cannon fired. A massive beam of destruction streaked through space, heading directly for the Indomitable. The shields barely had time to react before the blast slammed into the hull, shaking the entire ship. Sparks flew. Consoles exploded. The ship trembled under the force of the attack. Warning alarms blared. "Shields down to 23%. Athena's robotic voice called out. "Hull integrity compromised." Carter gritted his teeth, holding onto the command console to keep himself upright. The crew scrambled to recover from the hit, but the Titrax weren't done yet. The Tyrant's Wrath's remaining fleet swarmed forward, sensing the moment to finish humanity's last hope. Fighter ships and dreadnoughts closed in, surrounding the Indomitable from all sides. The battlefield had turned against them. The human fleet rallies. Despite the damage, Carter refused to surrender. He turned to Kova. "Tell the fleet to hold the line. We fight to the last ship." Kova hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Yes, Admiral." Across the battlefield, the remaining human ships heard the command. Though outnumbered, though their ships were falling apart, they refused to break. Captain Jonas Reed of the HSS Valor led a squadron of destroyers into the heart of the enemy line, weaving through fire and blasting apart Xitrax warships. The HSS Vanguard, a heavily damaged battleship, sacrificed itself, ramming straight into an enemy cruiser, creating a massive explosion that took out several Xitrax ships. Humanity would not go down without a fight. But it still wasn't enough. More Xitrax warships appeared from hyperspace, reinforcing their fleet. They were endless, like a never-ending swarm. They were losing. The Indomitable's last hope. Carter clenched his fists. They needed a miracle. Athena suddenly spoke. "Admiral, there is one option." Carter turned sharply. "I'm listening." "The Indomitable still has one final weapon, the Nova Core overload." Carter stiffened. He knew exactly what Athena was referring to. The Nova Core was the ship's experimental energy reactor, capable of unleashing a blast powerful enough to rival a dying star. But there was a catch. If they used it, it would destroy everything in range, including the Indomitable itself. Kova's eyes widened. "You're saying we blow up the ship?" Athena's voice was calm. "If we detonate the Nova core at the right time, it will cause a chain reaction, wiping out the Skytrax fleet, including the Tyrant's wrath." Silence fell over the bridge. The crew stared at Carter, waiting for his decision. If they activated the Nova core, it would mean the end of every Skytrax ship in the area, but also the end of the Indomitable. There would be no escape. Carter closed his eyes for a brief moment. This was not just about his crew. This was about humanity's survival. He exhaled, opened his eyes, and spoke the words that would decide the fate of the battle. "Prepare for overload. The countdown begins." Athena immediately began the sequence. Nova core overload initiated. Estimated detonation: 5 minutes. Kova swallowed hard. "Admiral, if we do this..." "I know," Carter said, "but this is our only chance." The Skytrax fleet began closing in, unaware of the impending disaster. High Lord Virex, watching from the Tyrant's wrath, smirked. "The humans are cornered. Finish them." As Skytrax warships charged forward, Carter gave his final command. "All hands, prepare for impact." The trap unfolds. The HSS Indomitable burned, its hull scarred from battle, yet it still pressed forward. The ship had taken a beating, and the crew knew they were fighting a battle they might not survive. But no one hesitated. No one surrendered. The Nova core overload countdown had begun. 4 minutes and 30 seconds until detonation. Admiral Elias Carter stood tall on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the holographic display. The Skytrax fleet was closing in, their warships forming a deadly perimeter around the Indomitable. "They think they've won," Carter muttered. Lieutenant Sarakova checked the tactical screen. "Admiral, the enemy fleet is repositioning. They're tightening their formation to ensure we can't escape." Carter smirked. "Exactly what we want." The Skytrax had fallen into the trap. By surrounding the Indomitable, they had unknowingly placed themselves within the blast radius of the Nova core overload. Every enemy ship within range would be obliterated when the detonation occurred. The only problem: the Indomitable would be caught in the explosion too. The enemy's final assault. On board the Tyrant's wrath, High Lord Virex observed the battle with cold amusement. "Pitiful," he muttered. "They fight like cornered animals, refusing to accept their fate." He turned to his second-in-command, a Skytrax officer with glowing green eyes. "Destroy them." The order was given. From all sides, Skytrax warships unleashed their full firepower. Plasma beams, torpedoes, and energy cannons rained down on the Indomitable. The ship shuddered under the impact, metal plating peeling away as explosions rocked the decks. Inside the bridge, sparks flew from overloaded consoles. Smoke filled the air, but the crew held their ground. "The shields won't last," Kova shouted over the alarms. Carter gritted his teeth. "We don't need them to." 3 minutes remaining. The crew's final stand. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Marcus Duran wiped sweat from his brow as he and his team worked frantically to keep the Nova core stable. The reactor pulsed with dangerous energy, its containment field struggling to hold. One wrong move, and the core would detonate too early. "Duran, status." Carter's voice crackled through the comms. The engineer cursed as another panel burst into flames. "Holding it together, Admiral. But if we take any more direct hits, the overload might trigger ahead of schedule." Carter clenched his fists. They needed time. He turned to Kova. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We need to keep them busy until detonation." "But Admiral," Kova hesitated. "If we take too much damage, we might not be able to activate the overload at full power." Carter exhaled. "Then we make every second count." The Indomitable suddenly lurched forward, accelerating at full speed. The Sci-Fi ships were momentarily caught off guard. They had expected the human ship to fall back, or try to retreat, not to charge straight toward the tyrant's wrath. The Sci-Fi realized the trap. Virex narrowed his yellow eyes. Something was wrong. The Indomitable wasn't running. It wasn't surrendering. It was heading directly for them. The Sci-Fi's commander's expression darkened. What are they doing? He suddenly noticed the energy fluctuations coming from the human ship. The sensors detected a massive energy spike, unlike anything the Sci-Fi had ever encountered. Then it hit him. No, they wouldn't. His claws clenched. They're going to detonate the ship. Virex's realization came too late. The Sci-Fi's fleet had boxed itself in, forming the perfect kill zone. If they tried to flee now, their ships would collide with one another in the chaos. They were trapped. The final push. 2 minutes remaining. Carter watched the enemy fleet shift as panic spread among them. They had finally figured it out. Kova smirked. They're trying to move, but they don't have the space. Exactly, Carter said. We just need to hold them here a little longer. The Indomitable's weapons fired relentlessly, targeting the engines of Sci-Fi's warships to slow them down. The rest of the human fleet followed suit, blocking escape routes with their own ships. Even as they took heavy damage, the humans refused to back down. The Sci-Fi's had nowhere to run. 1 minute remaining. The last choice. Carter's hands tightened around the console. Athena, prepare for manual detonation. The AI's voice remained calm. Understood, Admiral. However, there is an alternative. Carter frowned. Explain. A controlled core ejection. If timed correctly, we could launch the Nova core into the heart of the tyrant's wrath before detonation, maximizing the blast radius while minimizing damage to friendly ships. Carter's mind raced. If they could pull it off, they might just survive this. But it would require precise execution, and they had seconds left. He made his decision. Do it. The final moments. Athena's systems worked at lightning speed, rerouting all available power to the core ejection sequence. The countdown reached its final stage. 10, 9, 8. The Indomitable's engines flared, launching the overloaded Nova core straight toward the tyrant's wrath. The Sci-Fi's flagship had no time to react. 7, 6, 5. Virex's eyes widened in horror. No. Stop them. But it was too late. The Nova core impacted the tyrant's wrath's command deck. 4, 3. The reactor collapsed in on itself, igniting a chain reaction of unstoppable destruction. 2, 1. Then, detonation. A blinding shockwave of white-hot energy engulfed the battlefield. Sci-Fi's ships were vaporized instantly, their shields useless against the force of the explosion. The tyrant's wrath was torn apart, its colossal form breaking into pieces, its wreckage scattered across the void. The Sci-Fi's fleet was annihilated. Silence after the storm. As the explosion faded, the battlefield fell silent. The Indomitable drifted in space, barely functional but still alive. On the bridge, the crew gasped for breath, shaken but victorious. Kova wiped sweat from her forehead. Admiral, we did it. Carter let out a long breath. They had survived. But the war was not over. As the wreckage of the Sci-Fi's fleet floated through the void, Carter knew one thing. This was just the beginning. Humanity's last stand. The battlefield was silent, save for the crackling remains of destroyed Sci-Fi's warships. The tyrant's wrath was gone, obliterated by the Indomitable's final gambit. But there was no time to celebrate. The human fleet was in ruins, and the surviving Sci-Fi's forces, though heavily crippled, were still regrouping. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Elias Carter struggled to stay upright. The ship's lights flickered, the air thick with smoke and the scent of burnt metal. Their warship had survived the explosion, but just barely. Status report, Carter commanded, his voice hoarse. Lieutenant Sarah Kova coughed and wiped soot from her face. Shields are gone. Engines at 30%. We barely have any weapons left. Carter exhaled. They had won the battle, but at what cost? Then came the next wave. From the darkness of space, Sci-Fi's warships still operational began to reorganize. Though they had lost their leader and flagship, they were not retreating. Admiral, Kova's voice was grim. They're still coming. Carter turned to the view screen. Even without the tyrant's wrath, the Sci-Fi's fleet outnumbered them. Their warships formed a new attack pattern, preparing for one last counteroffensive. And this time, the humans had nothing left to fight with. The remaining human ships, a handful of battered destroyers and frigates, were low on ammunition, fuel, and power. Some were completely adrift, their crews barely holding on. But none of them fled. A desperate choice. Carter stared at the screen, his mind racing. They had risked everything, and now there was nothing left to give. Admiral, Athena, the Indomitable's AI, spoke softly. We have exhausted all offensive capabilities. Our chances of survival are. I don't need the odds, Athena, Carter muttered. He knew what had to be done. Their fleet couldn't take another fight. The Indomitable was barely holding together. If the Sci-Fi's attacked again, humanity's last defenders would be wiped out. Unless. Carter's gaze fell to the damaged hyperspace drive console. There was one final option. Prepare for a ramming maneuver, he ordered. Kova's eyes widened. You're not serious. The Sci-Fi's won't stop until we make them stop, Carter said, his voice like iron. We take out their command vessel, and they'll break. Kova hesitated, then nodded. I'm with you. The last charge. The Indomitable's engines roared to life, flickering with whatever power remained. The ship lurched forward, heading straight for the largest Sci-Fi's battleship still in formation, the blood-forged Dominion, their new command vessel. The Sci-Fi's realized what was happening. Their fleet scrambled, trying to reposition, trying to stop the unstoppable force now headed straight for them. The Indomitable would not be stopped. As they closed in, the surviving human fleet followed, launching one last, desperate attack. They would not let their admiral fight alone. Laser fire streaked across the sky. Enemy ships panicked, their formations breaking apart as the human fleet charged. Collision course. The Indomitable was seconds away from impact. The blood-forged Dominion fired everything it had, but it was too late. Carter gripped the console, eyes locked on the enemy ship. This was it. Then, an explosion. But it wasn't from the Indomitable. From behind the Sci-Fi's fleet, a new group of ships emerged from hyperspace. Carter's breath caught in his throat. Human reinforcements. Reinforcements arrive. A fleet of human warships, new, undamaged, heavily armed, descended upon the battlefield. Their weapons lit up the sky, tearing into the already weakened Sci-Fi's fleet. The enemy stood no chance. Admiral René Vasquez, leader of the reinforcements, opened a channel. Carter, you still breathing? Carter chuckled, shaking his head. Barely. Vasquez grinned. Let's finish this. The Sci-Fi's, leaderless and outgunned, began to retreat. Humanity had won. The war is not over. As the last Sci-Fi's warship vanished into hyperspace, the battlefield finally fell silent. Carter slumped into his chair. His crew cheered, some crying, some laughing. But he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end. The final gambit. The battlefield was silent. Smoke and fire drifted through the wreckage of countless ships, Sci-Fi's and human alike. The Indomitable, barely holding together, floated in the void, its hull scarred, its engines struggling to keep power. Admiral Elias Carter sat in his command chair, his body aching from the battle's toll. Around him, the bridge crew worked frantically, trying to stabilize the ship. The reinforcements had arrived just in time, saving them from what would have been a final, desperate sacrifice. But something wasn't right. Lieutenant Sarah Kova was the first to notice it. Her hands flew over the controls, her expression shifting from relief to alarm. "Admiral," she said urgently, "I'm picking up something strange. A residual energy signature. It's coming from the wreckage of the Tyrant's Wrath." Carter frowned. "What kind of signature?" "Athena." The ship's AI responded immediately. "Unknown. The energy readings are fluctuating. High radiation levels detected." Carter's eyes narrowed. Something was still active. He turned toward Kova. "Patch me through to Admiral Vasquez." A moment later, the holographic image of Admiral Renee Vasquez flickered into view. She was aboard the HSS Resolute, her fleet surrounding the remaining Cytrax wreckage. "What's going on, Carter?" Vasquez asked, arms crossed. "We won. The Cytrax are gone." "Maybe," Carter said, "but something is still down there. And I don't like it." Before Vasquez could respond, Athena's voice cut through the comms. "Energy levels spiking. Something is activating." Then, a shockwave erupted from the wreckage of the Tyrant's Wrath, the Cytrax's last weapon. Every ship in the sector shook as the energy pulse rippled through space, sending debris flying in all directions. The bridge of the Indomitable sparked, systems flashing red as sensors overloaded. Kova gripped the console. What the hell was that? Athena's voice was flat. "Unknown Cytrax technology has activated. Source confirmed. Remains of the Tyrant's Wrath." Carter's stomach twisted. The Cytrax were notorious for their advanced weaponry, technology that humanity barely understood. "Can we get a visual?" he asked. Kova's fingers worked fast, and the view screen flickered, showing the wreckage of the Tyrant's Wrath. Something was moving. Within the remains of the destroyed flagship, an alien structure began to emerge. Massive metallic spires extended outward, forming an intricate, pulsing construct. It looked ancient yet dangerous, humming with raw energy. Admiral Vasquez's voice came through the comms. "Carter, tell me that's not what I think it is." Carter had no answer. Then, the construct activated. A massive energy vortex formed at its center, glowing with a sickly purple light. Space itself twisted, as if reality was being ripped apart. And then, from within the vortex, a fleet emerged. Reinforcements from the abyss. Kova's hands trembled. "That's impossible." But it was happening. From the swirling vortex, Cytrax warships appeared, larger and more heavily armed than any they had faced before. These weren't just reinforcements. This was an entirely new fleet. Athena confirmed the worst. Warning: Cytrax vessels detected. Energy signatures do not match standard Dominion warships. New technology present. They appear to be a separate force. Carter's pulse pounded. The Cytrax hadn't just sent a fleet to wipe out humanity. They had been preparing something far worse. A new threat awakens. The largest ship in the Cytrax abyssal fleet moved forward. Its design was different, sleek, black as the void itself, covered in pulsating veins of dark energy. It was unlike anything the human fleet had ever seen. Then the comms crackled to life. A deep, unfamiliar voice filled the bridge. It was not High Lord Virex. It was something else. "We are the true Cytrax Dominion. The pretenders you fought were weak, unworthy." Carter's blood ran cold. "Who are you?" The voice laughed, a deep, inhuman sound. "We are the architects of destruction, and your war has only just begun." The final decision. Panic spread through the human fleet. The battered Indomitable had barely survived the first battle. There was no way they could fight a whole new Cytrax force. Carter exchanged a grim look with Vasquez. "We need to leave," Vasquez said. Now, Carter hated running, but this wasn't running. This was survival. He turned to Kova. "Prepare the fleet for emergency hyperspace jump. We regroup at Fort Solace." Kova hesitated. "Admiral, what if they follow us?" Carter's jaw tightened. "Then we fight again. But not today." The Indomitable's engines roared to life, along with the surviving human fleet. One by one, they entered hyperspace, disappearing into the void. As they left, the abyssal Titrax fleet did not pursue. Instead, the alien voice whispered one last message. Run, little humans. We will find you. The aftermath and humanity's hope. The stars blurred into streaks of light as the battered human fleet jumped into hyperspace, escaping the battlefield that had nearly been their grave. The Indomitable, damaged but still standing, led the survivors through the void. On the bridge, Admiral Elias Carter sat in silence, staring at the flickering tactical screen. The reality of what had just happened settled over him like a weight too heavy to bear. They had won the battle, but lost everything else. The Titrax weren't defeated. They were evolving. And something far worse had just awakened. A hollow victory. Lieutenant Sarakova spoke first, breaking the silence. Admiral, the fleet is reporting in. Carter turned toward her, his expression unreadable. Casualties. Kova hesitated before answering. Over 70% of our forces are gone. Most of our ships are barely functional. The Vanguard, the Solaris, the Aegis, all lost. The names of fallen ships echoed in Carter's mind. He had known many of those captains, good men and women, lost in the fire of war. A part of him wanted to scream, to rage, to demand why, after all their struggles, humanity was still barely clinging to survival. But he couldn't afford that. Not now. Instead, he straightened his back and spoke with the weight of command. What about Admiral Vasquez? Kova gave a small, tired smile. She made it. The Resolute is leading the rear guard. We all made it out before the Titrax abyssal fleet could attack. Carter nodded slowly. One small mercy. A message from the abyss. The bridge fell silent again, except for the hum of the failing power systems. The ship's AI, Athena, suddenly spoke. Admiral, there is an incoming transmission. Carter stiffened. From who? Athena hesitated. It is not from our fleet. A chill ran down Carter's spine. Put it through. The main screen flickered, and the void stared back. A deep, distorted voice echoed through the bridge. You escaped. Good. The same voice from before. The voice of the architects of destruction. Carter clenched his jaw. Who are you? What do you want? A dark chuckle rumbled through the transmission. You misunderstand, human. We do not want. We do not negotiate. We do not conquer. The screen flickered, then showed a planetary system. Carter's stomach twisted. It was Nova Prime, the last human stronghold. The voice spoke again. We do not take. We erase. Then the transmission cut to black. The bridge was deadly quiet. Kova whispered, Sir, they're going after Nova Prime. Carter's mind raced. The fleet was too weak to return. Even if they turned around, they wouldn't arrive in time. His hands curled into fists. Millions of humans lived on Nova Prime. They wouldn't stand a chance against the abyssal Titrax fleet. Unless a desperate plan. Carter turned toward Kova. What's our status on Fort Solace? She blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift in tone. Fort Solace. It's still operational. Small fleet, mostly defensive platforms. Why? Carter's eyes hardened. Because we're not running. Kova frowned. Sir, we can't take them on alone. Our fleet is crippled. Carter leaned forward, his voice steady. We don't need to beat them. We just need to outmaneuver them. The bridge crew listened in silence as Carter outlined his plan. It was risky. Insane. But it was the only shot they had. They would rally what was left of the human fleet at Fort Solace, refit, and set a trap for the Titrax. Instead of fighting the abyssal fleet head-on, they would lure them into a battle they couldn't escape. And this time, they wouldn't just destroy ships. They would end the Titrax threat for good. The spark of hope. Carter turned to the crew. I won't lie to you. This is going to be the hardest fight of our lives. We've lost too much already. But if we give up now, humanity dies. He looked at each officer, each soldier, and saw the exhaustion in their eyes. But he also saw something else. Determination. They weren't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to win. Kova straightened. Then let's get to work. Athena's voice echoed through the bridge. Course set for Fort Solace. Engaging warp drive. Carter exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar pull of hyperspace jump. The war was not over. But for the first time in a long time, he felt something new. Hope.